So it's, let me see if it, are we recording? Yes. So it's 2 p.m. and welcome to this guest lecture with Annarita Leserri from PinBike. I've seen that you have already asked her questions in on the discussions board, but please feel free to write other questions in the chat, and then we have agreed to have a presentation of her of about 30 minutes, so that you'll also have time after the presentation to ask your questions directly to Annarita. And so let's stop me talking and let's hear Annarita.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Arianna, and thank you everybody for being here. It's such an honor for me to be here, being invited and stay with you and share my story and my daily work. So unfortunately, I'm afraid I cannot teach anybody anything, but I have some experience and some stories to share, and I hope you will find them insightful. So first of all, I will introduce myself. I can't see you. I hope you can see me. But after my very short presentation, I will delve into PinBike, the company I'm working with right now. And then I will leave some time for discussion and questions. And during that time, if it's possible for you, I would ask you to please turn your camera on so that we can look at each other. Not now, really, don't worry. I will, by the way, I will share my screen so I won't be able to see you. So again, I'm Annarita Leserri and I'm Italian. I'm originally from southern Italy. Let's say that my academic background is international relations. So I studied my bachelor in northern Italy in Trento, close to Verona. After my bachelor, I went to London and I studied a master that was called Geopolitics, Territory and Security. And everybody was expecting me to go into defense studies and politics, but I really got interested in territory. So I started to delve into boundaries, and part of my master's dissertation was transnational and transboundary transport. I really got interest in that, and I started working for the local transport operator. So I started my, let's say, work experiences into the transport sector, and more specifically with the local transport, that in my case was also transboundary and transnational, because I went back to live in northern Italy, close to the border with Austria. After that, I moved to Barcelona and I started working with a company that was dealing with research and innovation projects. So you might know that the European Commission in the European Union has a whole branch of funded projects that try to promote research and innovation in all, let's say, sectors of new technologies, but also social innovation and so on. So more specifically, I was working for, well, in the main, let's say, broad sector of sustainable mobility, meaning in my specific case, I worked for more than 3 years in specific projects that were dealing with e-vehicles, green vehicles, fleet, automated fleets, automated vehicles, but also let's say, new digital tools for local authorities that want to promote new urbanism and new mobility in their environment. It all sounds very interesting, and it was, but after some years, I realized that this kind of innovation was too innovative for me. Like, it was so pioneering sometimes that I couldn't see the immediate results of our work. So this innovation project are meant to bring the greatest minds and companies in Europe together. They start the project together, but then after 3 years, the project is over and the result is good. But it's too innovative, too pioneering that needs some other years to reach the market and to reach, let's say, normal people. So it was very difficult for me to explain to my grandparents what I was doing. And so last year, I was looking for a new job, and I got an opportunity from southern Italy. So by coincidence, this opportunity was coming from my home region, so again, southern Italy. And I joined PinBike. So what we're doing at PinBike, basically, we pay people to cycle more because we try to nudge travel behavioral change towards more sustainable and more active mobility. And there are many ways of doing that. There's a bunch of studies about psychology that says behind behavioral changes, and basically, if you want somebody to change their attitude or their behavior, you should use either a stick or a carrot or a combination of them. We are using a very powerful carrot that is money. So I joined the company because after 5 years since its foundation, the company was launching their first international project. So because I had an experience in dealing and managing the international projects and D projects, they needed somebody that could jump into a new international project that was engaging 3 European cities. So I know the geography of Europe is quite difficult, but basically this project was involving the capital city of Estonia, close to Russia, more or less, that is called Tallinn, and then a city in northern Portugal that is called Braga, and then Istanbul in Turkey. So right now, what I'm doing at PinBike, I'm still a project manager as I was in Barcelona, and I'm also dealing with communication and dissemination. That's why I'm here today. I'd say I was, before you guys joined this guest lecture, I was telling Arianna that I kind of brought some of my impressions from Barcelona to southern Italy. So I don't know if you guys visited Barcelona lately, but during the past, let's say 5 to 10 years, well, starting from the Olympic Games in 1992, the city has experienced a major change. So and right now in Europe, but also in let's say internationally, the city is becoming one of the leader of let's say practical urbanism, sustainable mobility, people-centered mobility and government. So yeah, having lived in Barcelona kind of was a university of life for me, and I learned so much about new trends and new politics, but also I learned so much about urban cycling and being an urban cyclist. So right now I want to delve a little bit more into what PinBike does, and I have a presentation ready for you. So let me please share my screen. I guess I can. Here we go. Good. You see my screen? Yes, I can see.
No, actually, let me see. Not sure. Yeah, now yes. Now yes.
Good,
and
good.
If you can also have it perhaps in full screen. Yes, now it's perfect.
Good. Okay, brilliant. So thank you for confirming this. So basically, I told you already that PinBike pays people to drop their car and to take their bike instead. So there are many different benefits of cycling instead of driving a car in our cities. And I think that many cities around the globe share the same issues of air pollution, noise pollution, traffic congestion, poor quality of life, and so on. So never been to Vancouver, unfortunately, but I have traveled throughout Europe quite a lot, and I think that many different cities have share the same issues. So I do hope that this presentation is also insightful and thought-inducing for you. Basically, the company was founded 5 years ago, almost 6 years ago, but the study that I'm showing right now on the screen was released last year by Ipsos. So we know this already, but we're always looking for updated studies that tells us how the global population is performing towards cycling. So Ipsos last year studied 28 countries across the world, and they found out that more than 60% of adult population can ride a bike, and more than 40% own a personal bike that they can use immediately. But only 12% of them commute using their bikes. So they go to work or go to school every day using their private bikes. So what we are trying to do at PinBike is to fill the gap between people that can ride a bike, own a personal bike, so they already have all the let's say necessities covered to start a travel behavioral change, but still don't do that. Why? Well, the phenomenon of urban cycling is very complex, and there are many different factors that influence the travel behaviors, first of all, and then the perception and capabilities to undertake a travel behavioral change. So some of the main reasons are listed here. Some people say that they don't ride in their cities because they don't own a bike, which is not always true, as I told you already. Or there are some other people that say that they don't ride a bike because there is no bike sharing service or no bike related infrastructure in the cities, like bike lanes or bike parkings and so on. But if we delve into those reasons, we back them with statistics, we can see that they do not tell the whole story. So even if people own a bike, they don't use it on a daily basis. So maybe they have multiple bikes in their homes, but they use them for leisure activities or for outdoor activities. So ownership of a bike doesn't necessarily mean that we are driving car drivers out of their cars and on their bikes. And similarly, having bike sharing services and bike related infrastructure doesn't necessarily mean that they will be used and that they will be used properly. So I don't know how the situation is in Vancouver, but in Italy and Europe, we have many examples of services that were vandalized and were not used properly or were not used at all. So at a point, they were just dismantled. And this happened in my home city, for example. So they started a new project, a new, service of e-scooter sharing that went on for a couple of years, and then it wasn't used properly, and it wasn't used in the same, how to say, in the volumes that were expected from the company and the city. And so at the end of the day, they just dismantled it. And finally, regarding bike lanes, this is incredible to me, but unfortunately, the number of bike lanes in Italy has increased by 50% in 8 years, but its use decreased by 0.3%. Again, this having new bike lanes doesn't necessarily mean that they are built in the right direction, or they are built for the right volume of traffic, and so on and so forth. So, of course, PinBike recognizes that all these factors are important. I am an urban cyclist myself, so of course I would like to have more bike sharing services, more bike lanes, but it's also important that we recognize that urban cycling and travel behaviors are psychological factors and cultural factors. So apart from, on top of all these important elements, we also need to address the culture of sustainable mobility and travel behaviors. So after all this introduction, we finally came to PinBike. I told you already what we do, but what's important to know is that there are many other systems and apps and programs and projects out there that try to nudge travel behavioral change by paying people with some credits or cryptocurrency, or they also invented the eco coin, something like this. So you gain points for saving CO2 emissions. All of them are fine, but PinBike is based on a patented system that can certify or control, if you want to, urban bike rides. So we can actually tell our customers, our mobility managers, that people actually rode a bike and not other means of transportation, and for the amount of kilometers that they say they've ridden. So there are, for example, I talked with a company mobility managers, and she's doing all this gamification and rewarding mechanism based entirely on self-declarations by people, which is an act of faith on the one hand, and on the other hand, it's an incredible waste of time. It's such a time-consuming and energy-consuming job for her. So the patented system is based on the integration of two sources of data collection. One comes from the GPS of your app that tracks you while you're cycling, and the second source of information comes from the kit I will show you in a second. So there's a small sensor that gets mounted on the wheel of your bike and collects data as well. After that, these two sources of data collection get combined, and if they kind of validate each other. So there's virtually no way of cheating on the system. That's very important for us to have an anti-fraud system, because we want to reward people with real money. So if I gave people whatever kind of prize, I wouldn't really mind. But because we're giving up to 30, 50, 80 euros per month to each participant, we need to make sure that they are not cheating on the system to get more money. And if you have a look at the, if you rethink about the previous services and infrastructure, PinBike works, let's say, the other way around. So if cities decide to launch a new bike sharing service, or they decide to build new bike lanes, they invest some money and then they wait for these services or infrastructure to be used. But PinBike works the other way around again, because only if participants cycle, only then will the municipality spend their money. Otherwise, if the project is not working because for whatever reason people are not cycling, cities just save money on this cost category. So can you hear this video?
Yes, we
Arianna,
can see.
can you please
now
tell
you
me
stopped
if
it.
you...
Yeah, now you stopped it, but we were able to see it. Yes.
What about now?
Did you remember to share also? I mean, to you know that you have to also to share the sound. Once you share the screen, there is something that you have to. There is a little box at the end before sharing, in which you to share the sound.
I will try again.
Yes.
And if it doesn't work,
in basso a sinistra, no? C'è una cosina che devi cliccare before sharing the screen.
I'll try again, but if it doesn't work, it doesn't really matter, and I will...
In basso a sinistra, you will see share sound, condividi.
You sure I have this option? Because I can only see share my screen. Never mind. It's not really important. I can tell you what happens in the video, and then I will share the video with you guys. Can you see my screen now, by the way?
Not anymore. Not anymore,
really?
but
okay, I'll try again. I'm sorry.
Once you're sharing, just click on the... Okay.
So the video tells you more about specific options that cities often ask us. So there are some cities that want us to directly send money into bank accounts. So participants directly receive their money through a bank transfer, and that's it, end of the story. And then they can spend the money wherever they want, anywhere they want. But there are some other cities that want people to receive vouchers to be spent in local shops. In this way, the money gets kind of reinvested. So it gets to cyclists first, so a specific category of citizens, and then the money gets to storekeepers that are still another kind of citizens. So at the end of the day, active mobility and sustainable mobility represents a boost to proximity trade. And in my humble opinion, that also means that there's more citizen engagement. So there's more awareness raising on climate action and also social issues that I will tell you in a second. So basically, PinBike is based on three main elements: the kit, the app, the dashboard. The kit is this small box here that you can see, and
can you, sorry to interrupt you, Anarita, can you put it in bigger presentation to get the slide a little bit bigger?
I thought we're sharing
full screen, like
in presentation mode.
Yes, like this. Yeah, you were there.
Yeah.
No, as you did it before. Full screen. But it's okay.
So you're not seeing full screen.
It's okay like that. It's okay. Just go ahead. Don't worry. We can
I'm
see.
sorry for this. I promise I will share the presentation so everybody can have a double check. But really, right now, what's important to see is the camera, because I'm showing the sensor that gets mounted on the wheel of the bike, so it spins along with the wheel. And this is the first source of data collection that gets combined with the second source of data collection and second element of PinBike, which is the app. So this is the tool for final users. People can get the app, they can record their sessions, they can challenge themselves, challenge other users, and they can access the monthly rankings, and they can get kilometric reimbursement. So every kilometer has an economic value. Usually it's 20 to 25 cents. And then there's a maximum, usually a daily, let's say a daily threshold. Usually it's 1 to 2 euros, and then a monthly threshold. It could be either 30 or 50 or 80 euros, whatever. And then there are monthly prices, so extra money for being among the top performers, extra money for filling a questionnaire, or for taking part in a local event, for example. There's also another feature that I'm very fond of, which is kind of a communication channel with city managers. So people can receive notifications and surveys, and they can send reports. They can send reports about pretty much anything, but there are some specific categories. For example, architectural barriers. So that you can actually take a picture of this architectural barrier, or a car that's illegally parked, or a roll in the a hole in the road, and you can pin it on the map, and then the city managers will receive this info and will be able to decide what to do. I will show you in a couple of slides. Finally, the dashboard is a final element of PinBike, and it's also the tool for mobility managers and city managers. So as I told you, there are two sources of data collection that get combined on this dashboard, that also gives us, let's say, some specific visualization of all this data. So for example, we have heat maps, traffic heat maps. I'm not sure you're familiar with this idea. So basically, heat maps show the traffic and change colors according to the volume of traffic. So they get redder as the traffic gets more traffic in. And there's also, let's say, the dashboard is also a monitoring tool. So city managers can constantly see the performance of their project, because there's a set of KPIs that they can constantly monitor. And as I told you already, this is the counterpart of the communication channel that I was explaining before. So city managers and mobility managers can send notifications and surveys, and they can receive reports about architectural barriers and infrastructural status. So let's delve a little bit more. I want to give you a flavor of the dashboard. So this is a set of KPIs that gets updated each day. So city managers can see the number of active users, kilometers written, CO2 saved, average distance covered by cycling, and then there's also info regarding peak times, peak days, main purpose of cycling, whether it's a leisure activity or commuting activity, and also some statistics about the users. So age, gender, car ownership, and also type of bike. Another important thing.
Sorry to interrupt you, Anarita, because we couldn't really read exactly, because it's not in full screen, the slides. For example, about gender, are there more, more women than men biking? In that, or
it's difficult to say. There's no one rule fits all. So I can bring you some examples. The city of Tallinn in Estonia they selected the users. So they wanted 45% male, 45% female, 10% non-binary. So if you look at Tallinn, you will say that there's no difference among different genders regarding cycling. But if you look at Istanbul, for example, there was no such rule in the same project. So it was entirely on a first come first basis, and there were more male than female cyclists. So does it really depend on gender, or does it depend on specific rules that were set by city managers? See, so it's difficult. I can answer this question related to specific projects, but not as an overall answer. Okay, I'm sorry you can't see it full screen. I'm not sure what's going on, but what about
it's just, let me see. Now it's better. Absolutely. It's like that. Yes, perfect. Thank you.
I don't know what happened. I just clicked on.
So it's like, for example, Monday and Wednesday, it's when people bike more. Yes.
Yes, but you should also consider that this, for example, was the project, I can't remember, I think it was Braga. But some cities decide to reward more commuting cycling than general cycling. So, for example, if you cycle to go to work, you will get 40 cents per kilometer. If you cycle to go to the supermarket, you will still get money, but you will get 20 cents. For example, this is just an example. It's just, I want you to be aware of the possibilities of the platform. So the platform recognizes whether you are going to work or you're going to school, or if you're not going to your, let's say, commuting destination. So that also can, let's say, specific rules of the project could influence peak times and peak days, because of course, people got rewarded more during working days if they went to work or school than they got rewarded on weekends.
I see. Thank you for that explanation.
Yeah, no, thank you for your question. Okay, so heat maps. This is the map of Tallinn. I think there was no chance that you could recognize this map. So as you can see, there's a gray area, which is the initiative area. So the city managers, together with the city managers, we decided to include some areas in the project and exclude some other areas from the project itself, meaning that people could still cycle outside the area, but they were not able to get rewarded for those kilometers. Once they entered the gray area, they started earning money. So again, this is a heat map, so you can see that there's some cycling traffic coming even from outside Tallinn, and then this traffic is green, and then when it gets into the city center, it becomes yellow and then red. The colored spots that you can see on the map are the points, or let's say locations, where people start their journey, have a break, and stop their journey. And this is an important information when it comes to planning services and infrastructure related to cycling. So for example, you might want to have a bike sharing station close to a location where people usually stop or start their journey. Or you might want to have a drinking fountain where people usually have a break. So this, again, this is important information for urban planners. And finally, this is a visualization of reports sent by users in Tallinn. So the blue spots on the map represent the locations where there's an architectural barrier or let's say some dangerous status of the infrastructure. And of course, there's a map, but there's also a list of records with further information so that city managers can understand who sent the record, what was the date it was sent, because sometimes they might even be aware of those issues, and there's already some maintenance planned or some intervention planned. In some other cases, they are not aware of this issue, so they can decide what to do and when to do that. This is an overview of our past projects. So I guess that you don't know all the cities. Most of them are in Italy. So we launched more than, let's say that we launched projects in more than 25 Italian cities. And among them, there's Bergamo, Bologna, Bari, Pescara. These are, let's say, big cities, important cities in Italy, but don't worry if you don't know them. And there are some international cities as well. So I mentioned Braga, Istanbul, and Tallinn. And it's not in this slide because it's just started last month, but we also launched another project in Lisbon, which is the capital city of Portugal. And you can also advocate for your city. So there's also the possibility for you to get in contact with us to help us spread the project in your city or company so that we can launch a project together. Again, before you guys joined this lecture, I was telling Arianna that right now the company is pretty much focused on innovation. So there are several, let's say, innovation projects that we are carrying on. One of those is, let's say, an extension of the gamification and certification mechanism that we're currently applying to cycling to more means of sustainable transport, including public transport, carpooling, other forms of micromobility, and walking. So this innovation idea that's been going on for quite some years now took the form of a proper project in January this year. So we got funded to kick off another project that is called the Reactivity, and that will certify and reward all kilometers ridden using public transport, walking, cycling, or carpooling. And of course, this is a start. This is the first time that we, let's say, develop such a solution, and that we have the possibility also to test it into different cities. And we do hope that, say, starting from next year, we will have a rolled out solution that we will be able to offer to more cities and more companies. That's pretty all for my presentation. So if it's all right for you, I will stop the presentation now and stop sharing my screen and come back to you so that we can open the stage for questions and discussion.
Thank you, Anarita, for your interesting presentation. We already have a question from Leonora in the chat, and she's asking, it looks like most of the money to fund the payments comes from municipal tax dollars in some fashion. Is that correct? Does any come from the companies where people work?
Yes. Quick question, quick answer. Yes.
Sure.
So let's say that the primary interest in our company comes from cities, because cities are the most interested stakeholder in reducing car traffic, improving quality of life, and that only can come from cities. Cities usually fund this project through regional funds or national ones or international ones. But there are even some cities that decide to fully fund this project with internal resources. As for companies, that's easier because many companies have already some kind of welfare platform for the employees. So there are many companies that already have some options. So you can choose among the I don't know, healthcare or sport or children care, and they just plug in the bike to work option. So if you bike to work, if you cycle to go to work, you will get more money in your monthly payroll.
Thank you. And Isabella is asking, has incentivizing bike use with PinBike correlated with an increase in bike use?
Yes. So we have some evidence that at least in a couple of cities, let me answer first, and then I will share a comment of mine. So yes, there are at least a couple of cities that undertook some studies. They experienced an increase of cycling by 10%, which is considerable, considering that none of the city had a, let's say, previous well-rooted culture of urban cycling. Also, there's the international project that we launched last year, the one that was involving 3 European cities. We conducted a qualitative and quantitative study in that during the project, and we found out that at the end of the project, 90% of users, we are talking about 1,500 users in the 3 cities, 90% of them declared that they will continue using the bike even after receiving the economic incentive. Because this doesn't really surprise us, because our methodology is based on psychological studies and travel behavioral studies. So basically, it takes some time, it takes some resources to trigger a travel behavioral change, like any other behavioral change. But once you get the bike, for example, once you get a helmet, once you learn a new path to go to work, and once you've cycled for some weeks, then the travel behavioral change becomes a new travel habit. So you don't need any external trigger to continue the positive change. There's also another comment that I wanted to share with you. Most of the cities we work with have no idea about what they want. So they know that reducing traffic, car traffic, and improving quality of life, improving active mobility is good, but they don't know how good it is. They don't have any or little means to measure the impact of this idea or this project PinBike, as well as other services and infrastructure. That's also the point of, let's say, failed bike sharing services or bike lanes. They were not based on data. They were not based on statistics, on studies. There was no KPI set at the beginning of the project. So sometimes, of course, we're happy to cooperate with cities, but sometimes it's us that want to have some KPIs at the beginning of the project. So it's kind of against us, against PinBike, because if you don't set any KPI, then you cannot fail. There's no KPI, there's no key performance indicator, you cannot fail. You can just tell whatever you want. You can tell your own story about the project. But setting a measurable KPI helps the city monitor the improvement of the phenomenon of traffic reduction, I don't know, citizen engagement, whatever. And it also helps us prove the success of this measure.
Yes, thank you for that. And Paige was also asking from the discussions board if you have an idea that in the future this project might also be exported outside of Italy and Europe and reach also North America. But North American cities have different structures, so they are much wider. And what do you think about that? You were talking about Seattle, and
yeah, I had a talk with some representatives of the city of Seattle last year, because they came all the way to Europe to attend an event that was all about urban cycling and cities and smart cities and so on. Quick answer. Quick comment from my side. Yes, of course, it's replicable to other cities, provided that there's a clear idea of what the city needs. For example, the city of Istanbul in Turkey wanted to collect some data to inform new investments and new policies, especially regarding a brand new network of bike lanes. That was a specific objective, and we could help in some specific tailored ways. Probably I could not replicate or export that specific project to Vancouver, for example, that is not interested in bike lanes and they just want to collect data to, I don't know, to understand the relation between gender and cycling, for example. That's a completely different objective. So yes, tentatively, yes.
Yes, thank you. And since we have just a couple of minutes more and then we have to end this class, Ethan was also asking, while working on PinBike, have you ever felt that there are other specific industries or fields that could use an approach similar to this in order to solve their problems or improve their focuses?
Yes. To be fair, when I joined the company, I thought that the gamification system behind it is quite similar to other gamification systems that I've seen elsewhere. So, for example, in Denmark, you get money, you get cash back if you bring empty beer bottles to the supermarket. So not only is this, let's say, gamification system for the city managers to improve waste collection, but that also represents a new, let's say, social culture. So say, for example, people organizing a party, let's say private party, they have this tradition now that they bring beer to the host, and then they leave empty bottles to the host, because the host will bring all this glass to the supermarket and they will get money back as a compensation, you see, for hosting a party. So again, there are many other sectors and industries that could benefit from some elements of gamification. I'm sure that it could even be applied to the university itself. No, there are some ways and methodologies of teaching and learning could greatly benefit from gamification elements.
Thank you for that. And if you have any questions, please just write in the chat or raise your hand. But Wyatt was also asking, what was the greatest form of adversity the company faced since its beginning? And please, if you want me to ask other questions, feel free to do that.
So many of them. I would say at the very beginning of the project, there was one major challenge that was resistance from people themselves, and more specifically from storekeepers. So at the beginning of the project, cyclists received more money, and there was no engagement of storekeepers. But because storekeepers were against the cycling, because they thought that it would decrease the possibilities of profit from car drivers, my bosses thought that that category of citizens should either be more engaged in the project itself. So at the end of the day, they came up with this idea of giving vouchers instead of bank transfers, so that storekeepers would see and experience firsthand the benefit of having more people cycling and stopping by and buying more. Another major issue that still continues today is what I told you already. Some cities, especially cities, do not have an entrepreneurial mindset. They don't know what KPIs are. Most of them are not digitized at all. So unfortunately, some city managers don't know how to send an email, for example, or how to draft a notification in app. Or they have some of them have great, powerful tools in their hand, and they just don't know what to do with them. They get an incredible amount of data, and those of you who are studying data and data analysis know that having diffused the sensors, such as PinBike ones, is extremely important. It could greatly help combine this data with fixed sensors, such as cameras or counters in the street. But they don't know what to do with all this data. They cannot make any sense out of it. And finally, one major issue that to me has a very simple solution is communication. Some cities do not communicate or do not communicate properly with their citizens. They launch a brand new project with PinBike, and then they refuse to tell their people. So they do not organize, press conferences, press releases, or even Facebook posts. It's very difficult for us to tell. Of course, PinBike helps cities with communication, but we cannot really force them to do anything. So there are really the best and most successful projects that we had were those where city managers cooperated with us more willingly. So they accepted to have at least one press release or at least a Facebook post, at least a monthly meeting with us to check on the performance of the project, you know, basic fundamental rules of project management. But for them, it's a great major change.
Thank you. We still have one, just a couple of minutes for one last question by Sebastian. When conceiving the concept of PinBike, was the initial impetus to address micro issues of motivation for cycling and then the more macro innovations, such as the urban heat map and vouchers? Or was it done initially from a macro perspective, trying to address issues within the city as a whole? So what came first? Or
that's an interesting question. I think so. I'll tell you the story how it went, and then you're free to believe me or not, because I wasn't involved in this story. So apparently, my boss went on a journey, and he went to visit a friend of his in another country, in Belgium. And when he got to Belgium, he realized that there was a program, a national program that still exists. So the central government gives some tax reduction to companies that pay their employees to cycle to work. So more or less what PinBike is doing, but without any hardware involved, any software involved, just based on self-declaration. People, employees, tell their companies, their employers, that they are cycling to work, and they get 30 euros per month. And my boss thought it was a great idea, but he also thought that it might not work in Italy because it was very cheatable. So he thought that this idea needed some improvement to be exported, first of all in Italy and then to other countries. I can tell you that there are many other countries, like Mediterranean countries, that share the same culture. But also, I think that the solution is addressing several aspects at different levels. So of course, it addresses the cultural level, which, to answer to your question, is the micro level. So it addresses the resistance of people to cycle, the resistance of storekeepers to welcome new bike lanes, or I don't know, the resistance to buy a new bike instead of a new car, like micro decisions. But on the other hand, PinBike is also addressing micro issues like data collection, like economic opportunities for local shops, or traffic reduction, sustainable development goals. So at the end of the day, there are some leading cities like, I don't know, Bergamo in northern Italy, or Tallinn, or Istanbul. They were leading cities, so they were aware already of all these issues, and they were starting from the macro level, while other cities like Braga in Portugal, or I don't know, Bari, southern Italy, they started from the macro level. So they started from people first, because they wanted to target their culture and their resistance to travel behavioral change.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We are at the end of our beautiful guest lecture. Anna Rita, it's 12 I mean, it's midnight for you, and thank you
Me
for
too.
being with us. And students, if you have any other questions, Anarita will be happy to answer them by email. She will provide to me her email address. So if you want to keep the conversation going, she will be more happy to answer your questions. Thank you again, Anarita, and have a good sleep.
Thanks to everybody. Really, I was very pleased to receive all these questions. Thank you for your interest. And Arianna, let's stay in touch. I will share the presentation so you can forward to everybody. And again, if you have more questions or just interest in what we're doing, please drop an email or follow me on LinkedIn. PinBike is also on LinkedIn, so feel free to follow. And well, have a good day, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye to everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.